He spent more than 3 decades betting thousands of dollars on locked rooms he had never stepped inside. Behind those metal doors, he found comic books, antiques, rare collectibles, and even a collection of paintings worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Millions of viewers watched him take risks that most people would never dare take. They called him the Gambler, and on Storage Wars, Darrell Sheets became the man who made gambling on the unknown look almost effortless. But in April 2026, the world lost him. And what emerged afterward about the private struggles hidden behind his larger-than-life personality shocked fans far more than anything he ever uncovered in a storage locker. Darrell Sheets was born on May 13, 1958, in Los Angeles County, California. His father worked as a junk dealer and regularly attended auctions, and from a young age Darrell was right there beside him. By the time he was 12, he was already learning how to spot valuable furniture, artwork, and metals among piles of discarded items. It was an education that never came from a classroom. At 16, Darrell dropped out of high school. He worked a series of tough jobs, including truck driving, construction, and carpet installation. Then, in 1981, at just 23 years old, he committed himself fully to the business that would define his life, buying abandoned storage units and gambling that their contents would be worth more than the price he paid. For nearly 30 years, Darrell worked in relative obscurity. No cameras followed him. No fans recognized him. He was simply another buyer showing up at storage facilities across Southern California. He would stand outside a unit for a few moments, take a quick look inside, and decide whether to bid. His style was aggressive. Sometimes he spent thousands of dollars on lockers that others barely considered. Many thought he was reckless. Darrell saw it differently. He believed that fortune favored bold decisions. That reputation earned him a nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life, the Gambler. And then, after decades of quietly building his expertise, everything changed. A television show came calling. What happened next turned him into one of the most recognizable faces in reality television. But before the fame arrived, it helps to understand why storage auctions are such a fascinating world in the first place. Because every locker hides a mystery, and the next discovery could change everything. When Storage Wars premiered on A&E in December 2010, the concept was simple. When people stop paying for a storage unit, the facility can eventually auction off the contents. Buyers gather around. The door rolls open. They get only a brief look from the outside.
No touching. No entering.
No digging through boxes. They see only what is visible from the doorway before the bidding begins. That uncertainty is what makes storage auctions so addictive. One locker might contain priceless collectibles. Another could be packed with worthless junk. Nobody knows until the auction ends and the lock comes off. For Darrell Sheets, that uncertainty was exactly what made it exciting. His instincts were sharp, but his willingness to take risks set him apart. While other bidders hesitated, Darrell often doubled down. His signature shout became one of the most recognizable sounds on the show. Fans loved his confidence. They loved his energy even more. Alongside him was his son Brandon, who quickly became a fan favorite. The father and son partnership brought warmth and humor to the series. Brandon often questioned his father's biggest risks. Darrell usually ignored the warnings and bid anyway. Watching them work together gave viewers a glimpse into a family tradition that stretched back generations. The show also introduced viewers to a colorful cast of rivals and competitors. There was Dave Hester, known for his confrontational style. Barry Weiss brought eccentric charm. Brandy Parsanti and Jared Schultz represented a younger generation trying to build a business. Renee Neshoda approached auctions with careful precision. Yet among them all, Darrell stood out because he genuinely seemed to enjoy every second of the adventure. Over 14 seasons and more than 160 episodes, he became one of the faces most closely associated with Storage Wars. And along the way, he made some of the most incredible discoveries ever seen on the show. But one locker in particular changed everything. What was hidden inside would become television history. The most famous find of Darrell's career started with a bid of roughly $3,600. During a Season 3 auction, he purchased a locker that didn't appear especially promising. There were boxes, miscellaneous items, and several wrapped canvases leaning against the wall. Most buyers would have overlooked them. When Darrell and Brandon began unwrapping those canvases, they discovered something extraordinary. Inside were original paintings by artist Frank Gutierrez. The artwork was vibrant, surreal, and instantly striking. Realizing they might have found something valuable, Darrell brought in an expert for an appraisal. The verdict stunned everyone. The collection was valued at approximately $300,000. The moment became one of the most memorable scenes in Storage Wars history. A locker purchased for just a few $1,000s had produced the biggest payday the show had ever seen. Yet what happened afterward revealed another side of Darrell that many viewers never saw. After the episode aired, he researched the artist and eventually contacted Frank Gutierrez himself. Darrell learned that the storage unit had belonged to the artist. Instead of simply celebrating his windfall, he returned many personal belongings that had been stored alongside the paintings. He kept the artwork he had legally purchased but chose to give back items of personal significance. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about the man behind the television persona. Of course, not every locker produced a life-changing discovery. Some brought surprises of a very different kind. And one of those surprises left everyone deeply unsettled. Another of Darrell's biggest finds came during Season 5 when he purchased a locker packed with toys and collectibles. Inside were thousands of comic books, G.I. Joe figures, Hot Wheels cars, and countless other items. The collection was eventually valued at around $90,000. Darrell proudly called it the Holy Grail of toy collections. But storage auctions sometimes reveal things nobody expects. In one memorable episode, Darrell discovered a small steel lockbox hidden inside a unit. When it was opened, a velvet pouch contained what appeared to be part of a human jawbone complete with teeth. Authorities were called immediately. Investigators determined the remains were likely very old and possibly of archaeological significance. The discovery became one of the strangest moments in the show's history. That was the reality of storage auctions. One day you might uncover a fortune. The next day you might find something that raises more questions than answers. Through it all, Darrell laughed, took chances, and kept moving forward. He seemed fearless. He seemed unstoppable. Which is why the events of 2019 shocked so many people. For months, Darrell had been struggling with fatigue and shortness of breath. Like many people, he initially tried to push through the symptoms. Eventually, his body forced him to stop. In 2019, he suffered a heart attack. Doctors diagnosed him with congestive heart failure and serious complications involving his lungs. Suddenly, the man who had spent decades hauling heavy furniture and moving through storage units found himself fighting for his life. Darrell openly shared his condition with fans. He spoke honestly about months of illness and the frightening diagnosis he had received. Rumors spread online that he had died, but they were wrong. He survived. He left intensive care. He recovered. And for a while, it seemed as though he had beaten the odds once again. But recovery came with limitations. He could no longer handle the physical demands that had defined his career. Gradually, he stepped back from the auction world. His final full season of Storage Wars aired in 2022, and by early 2023 he officially retired from storage auctions. He relocated to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, where he opened a small antique store called Havasu Show Me Your Junk. It was a quieter chapter in his life. The cameras were gone. The bidding wars were gone. Instead, customers wandered through aisles of antiques while Darrell shared stories from a lifetime of treasure hunting. From the outside, retirement seemed to suit him. He attended events, signed autographs, and remained active with fans online. Few people suspected that he was facing battles that could not be seen. Then came the news nobody expected. On April 22, 2026, police responded to a call at Darrell Sheet's home in Lake Havasu City. Officers found him deceased. He was 67 years old. Fans across the country were stunned. Tributes poured in from former castmates, friends, and viewers who had spent years watching him take chances on television. Weeks later, investigators confirmed that Darrell had died by suicide. The revelation devastated those who knew him and those who had followed his career. The larger-than-life personality who seemed capable of overcoming anything had apparently been carrying immense pain in private. Soon after his death, fellow Storage Wars star Renee Neshoda shared details that added another heartbreaking layer to the story. According to Neshoda, Darrell had been dealing with persistent cyberbullying. He described cruel messages targeting Darrell's appearance, age, and family. He claimed the harassment had continued for months, and that Darrell had shown him countless examples. The allegations quickly became part of the ongoing investigation. Authorities acknowledged they were aware of the claims. As of the time of reporting, no charges had been filed, and investigators continued examining the circumstances surrounding his death. What makes that detail especially painful is the contrast it creates. On television, Darrell seemed impossible to intimidate. He was loud, confident, and fearless. He laughed at setbacks and celebrated victories with infectious enthusiasm. Yet public confidence and private suffering are not always the same thing. The reality is that nobody truly knows what another person is carrying. The version of someone we see on television, online, or in public rarely tells the whole story. Behind the jokes, the confidence, and the smile, there can be struggles that remain completely invisible. It would be easy to define Darrell Sheets solely by the tragedy of his final chapter. But doing so would overlook everything that came before it. He built a career from almost nothing. He transformed knowledge passed down from his father into a lifelong profession. He shared that profession with his son. He became a television star. He discovered one of the most valuable storage lockers ever seen. He survived major health challenges and continued doing what he loved for as long as he could. Most of all, he brought excitement and curiosity to millions of viewers. Every locker represented possibility. Every closed door held a mystery. And Darrell never stopped believing that something extraordinary might be waiting on the other side. The questions surrounding his final years may never be fully answered. But one lesson remains clear. The people who make us laugh, entertain us, and appear strong on the outside may be carrying burdens we cannot see. Darrell Sheets spent decades opening locked doors and uncovering hidden stories. In the end, the most important reminder he left behind was that some of the most difficult struggles are the ones nobody can see at all. If there is one thing his story teaches, it is that kindness matters. Because you never truly know what battle another person is fighting behind the scenes.